This is a preview of Pulse Check, an exclusive podcast for Quwa Plus and Quwa Pro subscribers. Hello and welcome to Pulse Check, an exclusive podcast for Quwa Plus and Pro listeners. Each episode, we bring in the experts from engineers and journalists to policy specialists and many others to stress test our perspectives on Pakistan and the wider South Asian and Middle Eastern landscape. The goal isn't just to tell you what's happening, but to show you the systems behind the decisions, be it procurement logic, policy trade-offs, institutional realities, and much more, so that you build an accurate big picture. I'm Bilal Khan, and let's get into it. Hi Aseem, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Good, I'm doing well. Yeah, so long time no record. So just to be clear to our listeners, we've all been in touch since the end of the previous season. The reason why we couldn't record any new episodes is because I think, for all of us, all three of us, this is more of like a part-time endeavor, and we just weren't able to come up with the time relative to our, busy schedules. However, this time around, we've decided to schedule things properly and also open the stage to season 2. That being said, a lot of work has been done in the background or in the meantime to set up 2 shows. So we'll have our usual Defense Uncut episodes free for everyone on YouTube every week. But in addition, our Quwa subscribers will also be able to access this new show, which is Pulse Check. So you might wonder, how does Pulse Check differ from Defense Uncut? The way I like to look at Pulse Check is more of a deep dive into certain aspects of the Pakistani, defense conversation that are not very easy to discuss. It requires a lot of chaining of the thoughts, so to speak. So as you'll see through this and subsequent episodes, Aseem and I are going to talk about a lot of underlying themes, ideas, trends, and we'll constantly cross-reference these between our episodes. 3 episodes from now, you might hear us say something that was sort of alluded to in this episode, because what we're trying to get into are the institutional, bureaucratic, really, I don't want to call them dry, but they require a lot of unpacking, and you can never unpack enough in just one episode. And plus, sometimes you're going to basically skip between one issue or the other issue just to sort of highlight the point that we're trying to make. So just to put it simply, like if you want to get like a much deeper inside look at how things work from a procurement standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, from the way Pakistan might prioritize one program over the other, why it makes certain decisions, why it doesn't do certain things, why it does other things. For example, why is it that it keeps going to China to procure things and not develop them domestically? Why does it choose to develop certain things and not pursue other projects? Why might Aseem, myself, and Arslan be skeptical about certain claims but optimistic about others? This is the show that will unpack that. So Aseem, once again, I thank you for joining me. How are you again?
Good.
So
Excited about this new format.
Yeah, absolutely. Now it's going to be more Q&A. I'm going to sort of probe and ask you questions just to sort of get your expertise. And then at the end of the episode, I might give my 2 cents on where I think things are going. But before we get into this week's topic, can you just give a little bit of a background on who you are? I think that'll be really helpful for our listeners to get some context into, like, when I ask you certain questions, why I'm asking you these questions, basically, like your education, your skills, what you're an expert in.
So essentially, I'm an aerospace engineer by training. I have a PhD in flight dynamics and control, specifically in adaptive control systems. I have a lot of experience both in academia and in industry. I've actually worked on a fighter program. I don't want to say which one. I've also worked, even though I've specialized in control systems, I've worked for guidance systems. So I've actually worked on missile guidance for air-to-air missiles. I have some experience simulating ballistic missiles and stuff like that. I also have a lot of experience in, adjacent fields. So for example, even though I've specialized in control systems, I know a lot about aerodynamics, structures and, things like that. And that's essentially a feature of me being, part of industry where even if just because you're a control system engineer does not mean you're siloed into that. You need to, need to know a lot about other fields, so you're able to work as as part of a bigger team. That's basically where I'm coming from. Basically, as- by definition, I'm a control systems engineer, but I have a lot of domain knowledge in aerospace in general.
Awesome. So I think you're going to be a very interesting guest for this. And I mean, all of our themes, because I know you personally as well. And we've been in the Pakistan defense conversation sphere for, I think, decades at this point.
Right.
It might be hard for people to believe how far back all this goes, but we know we've been there at the dawn of the internet, pretty much. Obviously, we're not that old, we were just kids back then. But the point being is that, we go back, and definitely I can vouch for like everything you've said. And just so folks are aware, I come from a public policy background, so I am really into things like, how bureaucracies and regulations and policy leaders, make decisions and that kind of stuff. So I think it's going to be a very interesting combination from this point on. So let me just set the stage here. Earlier this month, the head of the U.S. Intelligence Committee, or community rather, Tulsi Gabbard, had a Senate testimony, and she essentially, what she said was that Pakistan could potentially be on the track to developing an intercontinental ballistic missile. It could potentially one day be a threat to the U.S. national homeland, so to speak. And potentially it is something that she is basically highlighting that, American policymakers, decision makers, the security and community at large should be paying close attention to. Now, to be clear, it's not isolated to Tulsi Gabbard. We know that at the end of the Biden administration, basically, there had been a situation where, now I don't recall the names up front, but basically we had, again, U.S. officials or key U.S. spokespersons essentially highlighting that Pakistan's missile program is a potential threat. And in relation to that, again, there needs to be a concerted effort from the standpoint of the U.S. to basically curtail that program. And I think one of the things that sort of emerge out of these sorts of conversations, they've always been there in the background, but whenever an official, especially an American official, would make a statement in relation to Pakistan's missile program, especially claims about an ICBM program, sort of people get carried away with some, let's say, not so precise and let's say not so well researched calculations, if we want to call them, or suppositions. And one of them has sort of been floating around was that, hey, maybe Tulsi Gabbard has a point. Maybe, Pakistan could be working on an ICBM. And the reason being is that, for example, the Shaheen 3 or the Ababil have all the groundwork and the technology base to be an ICBM one day. So those are one of the theories that we see flying around. Alternatively, some folks, are pointing out that, hey, we know that Pakistan has been pursuing or been looking to develop its own hypersonic ballistic missiles, especially in relation to what the world is seeing Iran do. And then obviously, again, we also know that China it's been like a powerhouse of development for these technologies. And someone might even say, hey, it stands to reason that one day Pakistan could try pursuing that technology through China. So I just want to get your like high level sense of like, what do you think? What do you think? Number one, what do you think of Tulsi Gabbard's statements on their own merit? And number two, what is your sense of how Pakistanis in the, let's say, intelligentsia and wider conversation sphere sort of interpreting those statements? Like, you get a sense that there's might be some sense of validation, or weirdly enough, some sense of optimism from some circles that, hey, I hope Tulsi Gabbard's right. And you have some comments on that. And also from our end, we're just not sure if this is even the actual issue here to begin with.
Right. Okay, so let's get the first thing out of the way. So we know that almost all Pakistanis want Pakistan to have an ICBM, right? There are threads upon threads on defense forums, and there are videos that are speculating that we have an ICBM or we want an ICBM. There's a secret ICBM program. So there's a certain bias to read what is in the report to say that we may have an ICBM. But it is important to read the words in the report. And the report is essentially the 2026 Annual Threat Assessment Report. This is like a report presented before the Senate Intelligence Committee. So it's like a bureaucratic document that you can go online, I think, and read its text. If you read the text, it becomes clear that they're not talking about an existing capability. They're talking about a potential for a capability. So one of the things that you can read is it says probably continue. So when it's talking about 5 countries, which include Pakistan and China, North Korea, Russia, it says probably continues to research, develop, and field delivery systems that will increase their range and accuracy, challenge U.S. missile defenses, and provide new WMD use options. One of the things is, they're talking about, they're saying probably, qualifying that statement with a probably. They're not saying certainly. And then they're saying continues to research. They're not saying it exists right now. They're saying it will continue to research. And I'm pretty sure this is referring to Pakistan only, because all the rest of the countries on that list, China, North Korea, Russia, already have ICBMs. Like, they've had ICBMs for a very long time, but having ICBMs, so saying that they're researching ICBMs probably is in reference to Pakistan, right? Other thing is, yes, it is about ballistic missile development, but it is also referring to ICBMs as a tool of delivery of UMDs, right? They're not concerned about a conventional warhead being delivered to the US. It's about nuclear deterrence at that scale, right? So I think we should be really, careful about what is actually being said versus what we want.
Absolutely. I think it would also be worth discussing how at times officials can be pretty liberal with their language in what they're referring to. So when Gabbard goes out there and says, hey, that Pakistan could be researching ICBMs, I mean, I think that the word research in any context here could mean literally anything from someone doing a Google search. Like, have someone from SPD doing a Google search on something really specific, or, potentially going out and looking into academic literature on some form of, scientific or some form of study, what have you. And then it can go into actual, R&D and development. However, the issue here is that, and this is where we're sort of saying is that, the US intelligence community might have a lot more trust in Pakistan's, ballistic development than what we have assessed, because not to go into the nature of Pakistani scientists or their skills as individuals, we can, I think, safely say through many conversations with such people, especially from those within the nuclear field, especially, that the scientific community definitely exists in some form. It might not be as strong as it used to be, and that's a very critical thing to actually put out as well. But it exists. It's highly respected in its own merits, and it's quite capable. But the issue is that, number one, Pakistan is not a member of things like the MTCR, right, or the Wassenaar Arrangement, or other frameworks that would even allow it to have access to the necessary tooling, instrumentation, and other equipment and programming that would allow it to even begin researching this stuff in earnest. That's one constraint. Second constraint is that if we were to say, okay, well, what about the track 2 market, the black market, and what have you? Well, the problem with that is that the Americans have been quite effective at even curbing those access points, right? To the point where they're targeting Chinese, North Korean, Belarusian, and other companies for even talking to, forget about working on Pakistan's ballistic missile programs. Even talking to an entity like NESCOM can get someone in trouble, right? So that's a big control mechanism already implemented. Now, whether that control mechanism, and this could be an interesting discussion, but it's not something we can probably validate so quickly, but maybe in 5 to 10 years, is that control mechanism going to be as well respected given the current environment with regards to the way America's, let's say, foreign policies are playing out? That's a completely different question that is worth looking at in a couple of years. But for now, those control mechanisms are quite, let's say, stable and in place. Thank you for listening. That concludes the preview. For the full episode, subscribe to Quwa Plus or Quwa Pro.